Hi everyone, welcome. If you're still chatting, I'm going to ask you to take your seat so we can get started. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Dinah Martin. I'm the Executive Director here at Hourglass, and I would like to welcome you to today's First Friday Forum, where we're going to be putting a spotlight on a number of affordable housing projects that are coming here to Lancaster County. This is a really important conversation. We want to keep highlighting both the need for affordable housing, but also the people who are doing it and figuring it out and making it work. We're going to hear about 3 projects today from Dinah Hanchin, who's the president and CEO of HDC MidAtlantic. She's going to speak about phase 2 of their College Avenue project, the redevelopment of the former St. Joe's Hospital. We're going to hear from Chad Martin of Chestnut Housing about a few plans that they have, including the redevelopment of the former Strawberry Hill restaurant, which is going to be a really interesting project right here in the city of Lancaster. And we're also joined today by Michaela Allwine, who you might recognize from her former role of the County Housing and Redevelopment Authorities. She's joining us today from her new position as the Associate Director of Development at Volker, and they are working on a redevelopment project of a former elementary school in Manheim. So really excited to hear more about all of those details and what's going on with those projects today. And as always, after their presentation, we'll have time for questions and comments and discussion with all of you. So eager to hear what's on your mind on this important topic. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our First Friday Forum sponsors, Rogers & Associates, for making these forums possible, the Ware Center for hosting us, and Shoemaker, who does our live streaming services, for all of their help today, and the folks who are joining us online. So with that, and feel free, if you're coming in, file in, grab a seat. We're glad you're here. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first speaker, Dinah. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Dinah Hanchin, President and CEO of HDC MidAtlantic. My colleague, our Senior Vice President of Real Estate Development, was actually supposed to be giving you this presentation today, but she is out sick with COVID, so she texted me last night, and I said, all right, I guess I'll be the pinch hitter, which Chad informed me was the correct term for someone who comes in and takes over at the last minute. So I put on my dress pants, but still kept on my sneakers, given it's a Friday, and I will walk you through our plans for phase 2 of College Avenue. I know a lot of you already know who we are at HDC. We've been around since 1971, founded here in Lancaster County to provide affordable housing for those in need. That means seniors, families, those with disabilities, and also vulnerable adults. I've been president and CEO for the past 6 years, and we've been very active in trying to meet the need here in Lancaster County and across our Mid-Atlantic footprint that exists in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. Right now, we serve over 5,000 residents in 72 communities and roughly own or operate 3,400 apartments. Our largest portfolio is here in Lancaster County. We have 24 affordable housing communities, which make us the largest nonprofit provider of affordable housing, and we roughly serve about 1,200 households through that. Here in the city, I think the stat is right. We have 9 communities. Some of you may or may not know where they're located, and you may or not know where our 24 communities are located across the county, and that's all right, because we like to understand and know that affordable housing is no different than market rate housing, and it should be a seamless integration into the community, serving a variety of households at a range of incomes so everyone can thrive. Since I moved to Lancaster, I will say that since that time, we've been talking about affordable housing as a need that's growing. And right now, coming out of COVID, we are seeing even that escalate even more so, even beyond the county, but across the nation. There is no community, no county, no state that's not talking about the need for affordable housing. And I'm not just talking about those who are most vulnerable or the very low incomes. We're talking about families and people at a range of incomes that are being priced out of the market because of issues with housing supply and the escalation costs of housing. So I am pleased that this has actually reached the national stage in conversation to hopefully be defined as a critical priority, because we all know that here in Lancaster County and across the country we'll not be able to thrive and prosper as a community if we do not address this basic fundamental need an issue so people can grow and thrive and we could grow our economy and be prosperous as a community. So this is why it is so important for us to address this foundational issue. All the other things aren't going to matter: health and wellness, economic mobility, attracting businesses, if we cannot think about how to meet the basic needs of our residents so they can live and work and play in places where they desire. So that talks about the market failure, right? That's one of the reasons why HDC exists, the market failure. I would say that if developers could figure out how to maximize profits to build housing for lower income individuals, we may not be in this situation. So what we do is we step in, and the government has stepped in, and various programs have stepped in to figure out how do you deal with this inequality in our market where this particular population is not being served. So that is what HDC does. It works on gathering resources and identifying programs that can go ahead and meet that need and be able to solve that problem in our market. In addition, I will say we believe that this is important because we believe that housing is a human right. Again, understanding that everyone deserves a safe, welcoming, and affordable place to call home. And that's our vision, and we won't stop until we're able to achieve that. It may be in perpetuity, but that's our passion, and that's our commitment, and that's why we're here today. So in addition to building affordable housing, we also own and operate that housing. So we are a property management company, and we also provide on-site resident services. So many of you think about housing as just bricks and sticks, and folks like to talk to me about the real estate market and the bricks and sticks and costs of this. And at the end of the day, we are really about making sure that residents are empowered to achieve their personal success in thriving and vibrant communities. So that's a holistic approach. That's taking a look at what are the other services and supports that they need to thrive. And so we have a robust supportive services program that helps residents in crisis, helps them think about what their goals are when they're not in crisis, basically building trust with them to say, now that you have this stable housing, affordable housing, how do we keep you stably housed, and how do we work with you to achieve your personal goals? That it's their choice, and it's their power to determine their future. So very, very important to understand HDC's model. It's just not about bricks and sticks, but about building community and fostering a sense of agency with our residents who live there to determine how they want to set forth in their lives. I'm not going to talk about the need. I'm not Kim either. So Kim's not here. So we've overstudied this issue in Lancaster. I think in the 6 years I've been here, I'm not sure how many studies, deliberative forum, different commissions. I'm not going to exhaust you with the data on the need. We all know it exists. I will share with you some statistics from HDC. And of the 3,400 apartments that we have in service right now, we have over 6,000 households combined waiting to get into that housing. So when you think about need, I don't need a market study. I don't need someone to sit there and have a focus group with me about what the need is. And quite frankly, at HDC, we're really focused on solutions right now, not just talking about the challenge. And that's what I would implore everyone to think about, is being more solution-oriented and how you can support actions and people that are actually trying to solve the problem. And so with that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about sort of how we got involved in College Avenue, the redevelopment of a former hospital campus by St. Joe's. I'm not sure where that is on the slide, Mr. Slide Man. Okay. Oh, I have a little clicker here, and I have this little screen in front of me. All right. So you all know that phase one is actually under construction. Hopefully, many of you may have attended the groundbreaking that we had in February. That was an incredibly long road. And HDC entered into that conversation after UPMC decided to leave the market here in the city of Lancaster. And our very fine mayor used that opportunity to create a community conversation to determine what's the best use of this hospital campus. Some of you know that before I came to Lancaster, I did all of my work in affordable housing in the city of Philadelphia, where buildings like hospitals and obsolete school buildings sit to deteriorate for decades upon decades upon decades. This building has not sat long. Immediately, the mayor convened community conversations to determine what should be done here. And in large part, the community said we would like to see some affordable housing as part of the redevelopment of this site. And from that began to mobilize UPMC and a number of other stakeholders to look at comprehensively how do you redevelop this site and make sure it doesn't become an eyesore in probably one of the most stable neighborhoods in the city of Lancaster. And through that conversation, we were able to secure site control from UPMC on multiple parcels of this footprint. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of them and then dive a little deeper on phase 2. How am I doing on time? It's like, okay. All right, phase 1, under construction, 30% complete. Really excited about the progress that we're making. We hope to get 50% complete by the end of this year. We believe we will be opening up the application process in January of 2025, typically 6 months before we complete the project, which would be midsummer of next year. We have over 260 families who have asked to be put on the interest list to receive an application. And so we have the ability to just take names for people to let them know when we start leasing up so they can get an application. Applications are first come, first served, so even though you're on the interest list, it doesn't mean that guarantees you for housing. But that's just another indication of the demand that we have. Those are 64 units. And we already have 260 households making inquiries about how to apply for that housing. Across the street is the Delp Wing, and that is phase 2. And that is the project that we're currently planning right now. On September 4th, we had a neighborhood meeting where we introduced our plans to the community about what we're proposing for phase 2. And we're really excited about this particular phase because we have brought in a beloved community partner, Milagro House. I know we have representatives here today as they are in the community serving a very critical need for women and children, and they have a high demand for their services as well. And so we are integrating Milagro House's expansion needs into the Delp Wing. And we are proposing a single floor for them so they can better serve their families and children to achieve economic success and again, achieving the path that they want for their future. We are proposing 49 apartments in the Delp Wing. This is an adaptive reuse of that hospital building. It is not an historical building, but we are using the existing building to put in those 49 units. It'll be a combination predominantly of studios, 1 bedrooms, and a few 2 bedrooms. The incomes that we'll be serving is anywhere from $22,000 to about $50,000 a year. We also may be exploring some incomes at 80% of AMI and below to help with financial feasibility, but also to help with that target market as well. We have stepped up because we also have been part of conversations in this city about the need and the challenges of those who are unhoused and the shelter systems that are overwhelmed at this point. So we are proposing 13 of those 49 apartments to be set aside for those households who have experienced homelessness. And that's a really, again, an action-oriented way to stop the conversation from looking at just the problem, but presenting solutions. And so we really are excited to figure out how to integrate that into the Delp Wing so we can relieve the shelter system so those that are in shelter that have jobs and have the supports they need can move out into permanent housing like HDC. So that's our current proposal for the Delp Wing. We are looking at an $18 million project. It has roughly, right now, a $2 million gap in funding. That's the most critical part for us in terms of being able to figure out how we can execute successfully. We finance these developments through the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, and that is a federal program that provides an indirect subsidy to incentivize the private market to participate in affordable housing. So remember I talked about that market failure, about developers not participating in this particular niche. That program does that and incentivizes them. And we have to compete for those tax credits from the state. It is very, very competitive. Phase 1, we got it on the first round. Phase 2 is to be seen. Very, very competitive. 1 out of 3 applications get awarded at PHFA, and they become harder and harder to put together in terms of the rising costs and also the timeline it takes to close. So, and we have to have all the money raised before we submit for low-income housing tax credits. So I share that with you now because our goal is to submit and apply for those credits. But if we haven't actually hit our target of raising that gap, we will be unable to submit. So we are looking for funding partners. And we've had a myriad of conversations with the city, at the county, some local foundations, and individuals who are looking to support this project. So we are focused on that between now and the first quarter. PHFA, Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, the allocatee for the low-income housing tax credit program, has shared that they will be releasing the application in Q1 of next year. We don't know if that means January or March. I don't know, Michaela, what you've heard, but so it's sort of like you have to work really hard, and whenever they release that date, then you work harder and faster. The other piece I will share in terms of our timeline, we had a community meeting on September 4th. We had great turnout. We had over 50 residents there. Their questions primarily were surrounding traffic, parking, maintenance, security. So we are addressing those questions, and we'll continue those conversations in the neighborhood. We will be going to zoning at the end of this month for a minor variance and exception, to accommodate Milagro House's expanded facility, as well as just some minor issues around setbacks and something else that I can't remember, but I'll get to it. I think that's all I have. Okay. All right.
And so you could admit there were a couple more slides Kimberly had.
Oh yeah, the slides. I didn't even.
If you advance them, you can do a little sneak peek of the
sneak
layout
peek.
before we get to
Let's
chat.
do that. Am I doing it? Okay. That's the need. This is who we are. Other way? What other way? This way, the big button. Okay. So I also want to mention, thanks for prompting me on the slides, Phase 3. We have a Phase 3, and that is on 838 Marietta Street. We are in ownership of that parking lot, and we expect after we move through the financial packaging of Phase 2 that we would also then look at development of Phase 3. You may recall that in the sort of site control of the parcels owned by UPMC, we also had site control of a small parcel on Wheatland Avenue, and we actually had worked in partnership with Habitat for Humanity to actually transfer that site control to Habitat to address affordable home ownership. So they are in the midst of planning, I think it's 8 affordable home ownership homes there on this parcel. So they are moving forward on that. And that's something actually that HDC feels really proud of, about bringing in a multitude of partners to address needs, Habitat being one of them. On Phase 1, we also had United Disability Services doubling the amount of accessible apartments we were able to offer. Milagro House, of course, in Phase 2. So really, again, trying to figure out from the community conversations and the need how HDC can help create those strategic partnerships to, if not, we won't be able to do everything, but we can at least take little pieces of how we can move the needle forward. I talked about resident services. This is the map. It's a beautiful building, right? What are we going to do with the outside? Our architect will inform us on how we can enhance the facade. Not very exciting, apartments within an existing building. All right, I think I went over the timeline. Now am I done? All right, super.
See if I, oh, look at that. All right, well, thank you to Hourglass and to Diana for this invitation, and thanks to the other folks on the panel. Really a delight to be talking about a number of solutions. As you said, Dana, focusing on what each of us can do. I think affordable housing is obviously a complex problem that has been decades in the making, and for better or worse, that means it requires complex and a wide array of solutions that may also take years in the making. to put them together. So I think what that means is for each of us in the room and each of us as organizations doing this work, how do we figure out the piece we understand how to do it as well as we can, and then hopefully like keep figuring out that we can do more and do more better over and over. So that's a bit of the story that I have to tell about Chestnut Housing and how we approach this work. I serve as the executive director of Chestnut Housing. We exist to provide affordable rental housing to individuals and families experiencing homelessness because we really believe that a home is a key piece to a thriving and vital future. We also take pride in and are dedicated to creating tangible ways that individuals and communities of faith can come together to create more housing solutions in our community. So what that means in like non-mission statement terms is we're sort of a bootstrap organization that we grab help from wherever we can get it to try to get the work done and get more housing put out to serve our community and those who have the deepest needs around finding secure housing. We were founded, I'm going to say just a little bit about who we are. I know many folks in the room have a bit of an introduction to who we are, so I'll say a bit about that for folks who don't, and then want to talk about a couple key projects we have going on, finishing up with the work we're doing at the former Strawberry Hill site. So a bit about where we began. We were founded about a dozen years ago by members of East Chestnut Street Mennonite Church who began with this question of, can we just buy a house? It's a great example of folks who saw overwhelming need around them in the folks they were serving through community meals and at that time emergency shelter that would bounce around from church to church in our community. And just kept asking the question of like, it feels like there's something more we're supposed to be doing about these needs we see. And so they kind of came to the church and said, can we really just like buy a house? We don't know if we have the answers. We don't know if we know how to do this, but we're going to try and do what we can. And it began there. And where we are today, we now operate 22 apartments and homes around the city of Lancaster. So have a 12-year track record of working at this. All of our homes are focused on those who've experienced homelessness or are at risk of experiencing homelessness. So that means we're hitting those very low-income households in our community. So we are kind of I think of us as a sort of small but mighty and nimble growing organization working to keep asking this question of what more can we be doing in our community to serve these needs. And you'll see in a minute what that looks like for us. A little bit more about how we get the work done as a smaller organization. We, like HDC, really believe that it is important for residents not only to like land in a place that they can afford, but that when they continue to face challenges, that they have systems of support around them that can walk alongside them to find their way through those challenges and maintain stable housing. I'm sure many of us in the room are aware of the costs and the trauma that comes with the eviction process for households who go through that. So it is important to us that we work alongside agencies that are giving that kind of support and really working with residents to find the right steps forward to keep living into kind of sustainable and thriving housing for themselves. So what that looks like for us is we partner now with about 10 or 12 service agencies around the county who bring referrals to us for housing. And we work with those referrals to place folks in housing when we have it available. And then those agencies also provide some case management support in the kind of first year that folks are in our housing. And then we have some additional contracts with some of those agencies that as folks continue to live in our housing year by year as it meets their needs, if they are finding themselves in crisis or simply need more kind of support to rally around them again for whatever reason, we have some agencies that we can refer back out to as needed to provide those layers of support. And then we do work with third-party property management firms to do the day-to-day management of our properties, which means we're really able to focus on what we understand how to do well, which is in the space of acquiring and redeveloping properties. And I will say, for folks who, I know many folks in the room were involved with the activities that Hourglass did with Chuck Marone a year or so ago. You've probably heard of this like buzzword around missing middle housing. I'm never quite sure how helpful it is to latch on to buzzwords, but the concept is simply that we have not created enough housing in our community and in communities across the country that are in that space between a single-family home or a duplex and large multifamily properties, that there's this whole range of options from like 4 to 15 units of housing that we have simply not found ways to develop enough in recent decades. Chestnut Housing is finding a bit of a niche working at that scale where we rally resources from a number of directions. We expressly and intentionally don't work with the low-income housing tax credit program. Folks like HDC and Community Basics here locally and Volker do that really well, and as that's a competitive space, that's not a space we're looking to enter. But these properties that might be able to fit in like 6 or 8 units where there used to be 2, or that maybe have been underutilized in other ways for a number of years. We're finding ways to step in and creatively pull together the financing and the volunteers and the expertise to find a creative way to create housing there where there wasn't housing previously. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like for us. Just quickly, an update on one project that has been an important pivot project for us. Really, the first opportunity Chestnut Housing had to explore this kind of missing middle space was the redevelopment of a former nuisance bar on East Chestnut Street in the city that is now known as Chestnut Corner. We have 6 apartments there that we've been operating for a number of years that were converted from what was a nuisance bar with some kind of ramshackle rooming house housing above it. There are now 6 quality apartments there. So that was our first kind of foray into that scale housing. Our second project, which is currently under construction of that scale, is called Milburn Apartments. It's on Rockland Street in the southeast part of the city. It's about a $2.2 million project that construction began on in July. And we are thrilled that next year we will have 8 apartments there that we bring into our program. I'll say we're working with E.G. Stolzfus on that project, and could tell, if you want to hear more about how we incorporate volunteers in even kind of larger complex projects like this, I'd be delighted to talk with folks about that. And if you join our mailing list, you could even like pick up a hammer later this winter and help us get work done there, if that's exciting to you. One more that's a very recent project for us. It kind of has been a partnership in the making for a couple years, but then the actual property was kind of an opportunity that fell in our laps this spring. We are working with members of a local congregation who are helping provide some of the seed capital to start another project specifically to serve households in the CV school district just east of the city. So this summer we purchased a property on Lincoln Highway East that currently has an older single-family home and a garage apartment on the property, and our long-term development goals there are to create 12 to 15 affordable apartments on that space. That's in East Lampeter Township, which, as folks may know, if you read the news carefully over the last couple of years, has really been on the forefront locally of kind of answering their question of what more can we step up and do by really digging into a housing study specific to the township and then finding solutions to ease their zoning ordinance in a way that makes it frankly possible to build housing where it wasn't possible before. So this is a great example of a parcel that previously would have only accommodated up to 10 units for a variety of zoning reasons and will in the future be able to accommodate 15. And every apartment counts in this landscape. So we're really thrilled to be working in that township. So the former Strawberry Hill property, raise your hand in the room if you know which properties we're talking about, or if you ever even ate at the Strawberry Hill restaurant. That's how I know that you are old school Lancaster, if you've eaten at the Strawberry Hill restaurant. I have heard some great stories about like first dates and engagement dates and things like that at Strawberry Hill. So we had the opportunity working with the city's land bank authority to gain site control of these properties back in the winter this past year. So we're working towards acquiring those from the land bank. Our proposal is to, our plan for the properties is to create first at that corner hub that you might think of as kind of the anchor of that cluster of properties, to create some commercial office and meeting space that will become our headquarters for years into the future. There will also be some additional office space there if all goes well and we get the timing lined up right. The SOE Neighborhood Initiative will be sharing office space with us there with some meeting space that will also have opportunity to benefit community groups and neighborhood groups down the road. That's going to be, frankly, a pretty compact piece of the puzzle, and then we're literally packing in as many apartments as we appropriately can in the rest of the property. We're saying right now that that means 8 to 12 new apartments. It's looking hopeful that we can be on the upper end of that range, but we're still sorting that out. We will also be in front of the Zoning Hearing Board this month, so hopefully all goes well there for us and for HDC. We're just on the front end of this. I frankly don't have many updates about things like financing. There are a lot of applications due this fall. We will be pursuing a mix of public and private funds. Public funds from sources like the HOME program, which is a federal program administered locally, the FAIR program that's administered by PHFA, some sources like that, as well as local philanthropy, local individuals ready to get behind projects like this. So we're just embarking on that journey, but we'll be working towards raising what we expect to be about a $3.5 million project to accomplish that work. Couple details that I want to share in addition. You may be wondering where the name Dinah's Hill came from. We are calling this the Dinah's Hill Apartments in honor of Dinah McIntyre, who was a formerly enslaved woman in Lancaster who became a successful businesswoman and property owner. As you can imagine, the history on this is a little bit sketchy, and we have a few details that we can piece together about her story. As best we know, at that time, there were something like a half dozen African Americans in the city of Lancaster that owned property, and she was one of them. So probably one of the first women of color to be a property owner and businesswoman in the city of Lancaster. The property that is now had the Strawberry Hill restaurant on it was one of her properties. She owned 2 or 3 on that hilltop. She earned her living as a fortune teller, which I would love to know what that looks like as you're kind of thriving day-to-day life. She's purported to live to be over 100 years old. Hard to nail that down, probably not. I think the record says something like 118, seems unlikely. But she lived a long, long, rich life and was a real influence in that neighborhood at the time, such that the neighborhood became known as Dinah's Hill. And really for about a century, as I understand it, was referred to as Dinah's Hill until kind of newer waves of immigrants and, kind of became more subsumed by the Cabbage Hill legacy and cultural kind of sensibilities of that neighborhood. So we're really honored to pull that story kind of out of the history books and recognize her legacy in the way that we're honoring the property. And I believe I have a slide that has a timeline on it, but things are really early, so maybe following on what Dana said about phase 2, a lot can change at this stage of the process. If all goes well, we would love to be opening doors there in, say, about 3 years. So, and I believe I am at my time. Oh, here's our board. Oh, we do have a couple board members here today. Can I have folks raise their hand if they're on the board? Nick and Sue, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I appreciate being here. I'm wearing kind of a fresh new hat, previously working for the Redevelopment Authority and now working for Volker Development, which is an affordable housing developer that is relatively new to the local scene, but has sort of a long history working in affordable housing throughout the country. I'm going to talk about the Stiegel School apartments, and I'll kind of just roll into the project since my colleagues really set the scene with a lot of data and a lot of both data and anecdotal information about kind of the affordable housing landscape. So we'll talk about Stiegel School. This is an adaptive reuse project using LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, focusing on seniors, 62 plus demographic, located in Manheim Borough. So I'll give a little bit of information about Volker since we are kind of new to this area. Founded in 2001, actually, I think originally earlier, predominantly working out in the Midwest, but currently have regional offices in Colorado and Ohio, in Minnesota, and in Lancaster. There's two of us here right around the corner, and so we're really trying to expand our regional footprint. Right now, we have 3 projects in Pennsylvania, one being Stiegel School, one in Philadelphia, and one under construction just north of us in Lebanon County. That project and Stiegel School, being so close geographically, will share in property management. So we will be managing our own property here at Stiegel School. We have a little bit over 50 properties throughout the country. Again, smaller footprint here in the Mid-Atlantic. But we have 3 already in the pipeline, so we're pretty excited to expand the footprint here and look forward to additional properties here in this area. So the Stiegel School is a really interesting site. The team had visited over 20 school buildings just in this area in Pennsylvania alone before finding this real gem of a building. The condition was good. It had only been abandoned for, I think it was about 5 years. Physically, the building is wonderful. It's situated also in a really high area of opportunity, especially when we're talking about seniors and the walkability of a neighborhood and access to amenities, including transportation. And so you can see this picture of Manheim Borough, and then blown up to where the school is located. It is on that front kind of part of that orange site there, but really easy walking distance to a lot of the amenities in Manheim, which are growing by the day. Additionally, right at the corner of our site is a Red Rose Transit stop, which gets you right to downtown Lancaster. So not only was the building itself in really great condition and kind of ripe for adaptive reuse, but the situation of this site was really prime, especially for seniors and accessibility. So these are some of the existing conditions, and as you can see, the building, if anybody here is in, an adaptive reuse world, this is beautiful. There's not too much wrong with it, and that's not just on the surface. Structurally, it's been, taken really good care of as well. So you can see, kind of looking at the building here. Again, I think it was 2017 that it was abandoned for use as they built a new school building right up the street. A lot of folks have walked by or are part of the project team that actually went to this school, and so we've heard lots of stories. But you can see here the building from all different directions, looking pretty, not too shabby. So the site overview, as I said, it's situated really well in not only the borough, but sort of in Lancaster. There's accessibility to downtown Lancaster. It's walkable, conversion to apartments without the need of changing the footprint. So we are proposing and will be constructing 44 units, 1 and 2 bedrooms in the existing footprint of the school. The front part of the school was the historic building, and then in the 80s there was an addition put on, and so within this existing footprint we're able to construct 44 units plus additional communal space, which I'll talk about in a minute. So because we're using LIHTC, and as Dana mentioned earlier, with low-income housing tax credits, you're sort of targeting certain set percentages of area median income by PHFA. You're able to go up to 80% as long as the averages reach a certain percentage. But so with this property, we are looking at 20, 50, 60, and 80% of area median income. And with that, rents look like anywhere between $275 to about $1,500 for a 2-bedroom at that 80% AMI. There's a lot that goes into this to kind of make it work, but that's kind of the range in general for that 275 being a 20% AMI 1-bedroom, all the way up to the 2-bedroom 80% AMI being around $1,500. If you know anything about rents in Lancaster County, that is still low, but as we talk about affordable housing, these levels are set by HUD really, and so we're looking at incomes or rental amounts that aren't necessarily affordable to all. So I think that in just like looking at how affordable housing deals are put together, we really have to look at what is affordable, what is mandated, et cetera. So that's really kind of a discussion point that is part of our business, discussions throughout, not just Lancaster, but everywhere, is that we're really looking at what actually is affordable versus what is kind of mandated as affordable housing. With this building, we're hoping to and will achieve a pretty high energy efficiency rating. That's something that we do on all of our buildings, not only because part of it is mandated, but other than that, we're looking at, reducing the cost of utilities really enables us to reduce the rents for tenants. And so it kind of, looking at the operations of the building, it really makes sense to look at these from a high energy efficiency standards. So other amenities will include, like I said, professional management of the property management. We have supportive services as part of, there'll be on-site supportive services that look like case management for folks connecting to resources, et cetera. Integrated community room with a kitchenette. There is off-site parking and on-site parking as required by the borough. We have a physical fitness center, so we have a small gym that we've been speaking to folks who do physical therapy, geriatric physical therapy, to make sure that we have equipment so that folks who are living on our property are able to still bring in, the therapy needs that they have into their own home, and then washer and dryers in unit. So just some renderings. This is a view of East High Street and South Hazel Street. If you're familiar with the property, or if you remember from the first few slides, there were some architectural changes made throughout the years that we are going to be bringing back to original historic, looks of the building. We will be applying for historic tax credits, and so that with PHFA, there are some regulations, but also, I think it's just important to maintain the community character of, the neighborhood. So that's what it will look like from East High Street. That's kind of the main artery that goes through Manheim Borough. This is from the rear of the property. You can see there will be some parking right up close to the building, predominantly the accessible spaces, as well as emergency access. And then if you remember the site, you sort of cross a little bit of an alley to get to the remainder of the parking. So this just shows sort of the entry into the property. You would enter either off of Hazel Street or off of Logan Avenue, which is the small street in the back, into sort of the center kind of the center of the property, where there will be the communal space. And that communal space is a community room that's usable for tenants, offices, and supportive service offices. The fitness center is on the second floor. So just looking at Lancaster as a whole, wanted to make sure that this property and this project aligns with sort of the larger regional plan for both planning and also housing. So don't necessarily need to get into all this, because I hope by now that most people are pretty familiar with Places 2040, but really kind of making sure, and again, like I said, we looked at 20 different sites before coming to this one and saying, like, this is a really great opportunity to really tie into those regional goals. So here's the timeline. We were awarded LIHTC this past round in 2024. And sorry, the formatting looks a little bit funky on here, but hoping to have full lease up by the end of 2026. So when we're looking at LIHTC, and like Dana said, it's very rare to get projects that are awarded in the first round, and so this timeline is even pretty slim compared to like a lot of projects. College Ave also, well, there were some bumps, but in terms of getting that LIHTC award in the first round, that's really wonderful. And I think that PHFA recognizes the thriving community that is Lancaster. But with that said, it's often 1, 2, sometimes 3 years before you're even getting your funding. And then it's another, as you can see, a few years before you can get folks in permanent housing. So that's what I have, a little short. As I said, I'm new to the organization, so some of our development team is actually here and has probably been part of the project longer than I have. But happy to answer any questions about the organization or obviously affordable housing in general. Thanks.
Okay, raise your hand if you have some questions or comments for our speakers today about any of these projects or the affordable housing landscape. I know they're out there. All right, I'm gonna start there. And action, right? Oh, God, no. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Michaela, you touched on this a little bit as far as supporting folks who don't drive with placing your building near essentially alternate forms of transportation. I'm just wondering if y'all could talk about how your buildings will support people who don't drive, because U.S. Census data tells us that the poorest folks among us spend 30% of their income on transportation, $7,000 to $12,000 a year. So if we can support people to use alternate forms of transportation, that's money that can go directly back into their pockets.
Yeah, you can just grab those.
Oh, yep, there it is. Thanks, Chad. I can share that, with phase one, we have installed, or we'll be installing a bike rack, and I think the city allows a concession for reducing your number of parking spaces needed when you are able to offer alternative transportation on site. And we'll be doing the same thing with phase two as well. So, and I will say, as an avid bike rider, and I know it alarms the benchmark when I roll by on my bike early in the morning and the job site is open and I show up at the trailer. So very much it's an important aspect for us to consider in terms of just being able to, again, look at ways that we can improve the way that we're integrating ourselves within the landscape, and also focused on, I think environmental sustainability and looking at sort of that climate resiliency sort of components, however small it may be. And even, I will say, from the design perspective, green building design standards and looking at energy efficiency, all those are our properties. Communities are built to the highest standards beyond what market rate is required because of the funding sources that we access. And that's the interesting thing I would say about government programs. They want that program to do everything for everyone. And so that actually ends up being a little bit more costly, but I think in the long run, better off for the community as a whole.
I have to jump in on a question on that statement. Brian Davison, serve on the board for Hourglass. We have talked for hours about this subject. If you guys had any idea how important it is to us, as it is everyone else in the room. But I just have to ponder that statement for a second, because did some quick math, and the first project I think was $360,000 per unit for studios and small apartments. Then I think we were $291 and $275. I think were the two other metrics that I came up with, cost per unit. When the average house in Lancaster County, I think is somewhere around $325. How do we justify that expense if it's being paid, through subsidies?
So I would like to say, again, going back to government programs requiring things to happen in terms of being structured. So a lot of, I would say, the way the low-income housing tax credit program is structured is that in order for the investor to receive the tax benefit, the developments or deals are structured to basically break even. So that means you don't get a lot of cash flow coming out of that. It's very challenging to carry any hard debt. Also, and I say that because there are upfront costs that we build in at closing. So we fund a lot of reserves to protect that investment. We have operating reserves, we have replacement reserves, we have a supportive service reserve. So Michaela talked about seniors being able to access services. Those are all funded upfront early in the development. I will also share that our fee for developing that is also funded upfront, because you don't really have the cash flow to be able to sort of gain those fees through operations. So that is one of the factors that contribute to having increased cost to that. But I will also say that, let's look at our construction market right now, because it wasn't this costly. So when folks talk to us about construction costs and things like that, I will say that GCs, in terms of coming out of COVID, we know the escalation in those costs, they've went up and they stabilized, but they stayed high, right? I also will say in insurance as well is a contributing factor to those rising costs from an operations perspective and also from a building perspective. So the sort of inflationary environment that we're in has added to those costs, but we also have protections built in, because as much as people think that there's real estate development is a risky business, but affordable housing using the low-income housing tax credit program, they do everything they can to mitigate those risks up front to ensure, I will say, even through COVID, like it's one of the most solid investments you can make because we have all these protections in place. It doesn't necessarily justify high costs or saying, why is it this in the market versus this in subsidized? I'm just explaining the background of how it makes it complicated. And I will say, like, on the other side with GCs, there are factors of when you use government money and work with government agencies, I call it the cost of business. So it takes longer. You have to build capacity of a lot of others to get this job done. And so I also have a sense that sometimes those costs are folded into the numbers as well because of the time that it takes to execute.
So those funds that you escrow, how far out does you take that within the pro forma?
I think it's either 10 or 15 years. Michaela, is it? 15, yeah.
15.
Well, the services, the supportive services is all upfront. I mean, it's during the entire.
You've got a mic in front of you.
Yeah, sorry, I just don't like mics. You have to project it out for the entire compliance period upfront. So it's the.
Hi, my question is directed, I guess, to Chad, because you brought up the idea of East Lampeter being more flexible in terms of their zoning. And I know there's a lot of activity right now along the lines of zoning improvement and zoning change. Can you talk a little bit about how that could be valued in terms of, putting more units in vacant spots around town and around the county?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to start by just backing up Dana and Michaela. Even though we do not use the low-income housing tax credit, we do use some public sources that the cost of business is definitely there. And I mean, everyone can work with their legislators to find solutions for that, but those are not costs that we're putting there. That's just the cost of how the money works. And frankly, construction is really expensive right now. The actual bricks and mortar costs are real, and I know all of us wish that weren't the case, but there are not many folks finding ways to build apartments for less than $300,000 a unit, whether it's market rate or otherwise. Speaking to your question, Fern, I think you and I are doing a lot of work together around trying to advocate with municipal leaders on some zoning changes that are helpful. So I'll just name like a couple that I think can help our work and a couple that are specifically helpful in the case of the Bridgeport project that I mentioned. So this stuff gets really in the weeds, but things as simple as East Lampeter changing the required amount of square footage in the lot size per unit that they allow. That looks like a really small change in the zoning code. It used to say 3,000 square feet, and it's going to say 2,000 square feet. But that makes a difference of 5 units on a parcel where many of the soft costs that we're all describing, the site planning work, the development planning work, the PennDOT permitting, all of those kinds of things that we'd have on that site, those costs are the same whether we can put 10 apartments there or 15. So to be able to do 50% more in that case is an enormous benefit to that project for us. So that's an example of a very simple kind of administrative change to the zoning code that's going to have a real impact on at least one project in that community. And we could, if we had another couple hours to dig into that, I'm sure among the three of us, we could come up with like 10 or 15 other really simple things municipalities can be doing that make it easier to build housing. A couple that many of us are talking about broadly in the county are things like can we get away from single-family zoning in our communities toward making it possible to build 2 to 4 units by right on any parcel out there, and it can still be appropriately scaled. You can have many of the other requirements in place that would be there for a single-family home, but can you do that and still put 2 to 4 units there that don't really change the impact of that parcel on its community, but could at scale have a tremendous impact around the community more broadly? I'll maybe stop there so we have time for more questions. I imagine the three of us could go for a while about those kinds of changes.
Michaela, you had a series of percentages. Could you clarify that or repeat them? It was on one of your slides. It started with like 20%, went up to 50%.
So those are the set area median income benchmarks for different unit qualifications. So a family making up to 20% of area median income would qualify to live in an assigned unit that is assigned to that percentage. And it's benchmarked at 20, 40, 50. I think I did 20, 40, 50, 60, and 80 as part of mine.
And I think the translation
no,
of
40,
20% for a household it depends upon household size, but you're
Right.
roughly thinking like 20% is like $10,000, $12,000 a year.
It's quite low,
Yeah,
yes.
so folks on fixed incomes, folks who are on disability are usually the
Yes.
recipients of housing at that sort of income
Yeah.
target.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that all of those units are bringing in the same rent either, because that's just the benchmark for qualification. You have to be making 50% of area median income to live in that unit. If whatever you're making, you're paying 30% of up to 30% of your income as rent. So it doesn't necessarily set the rent limits. When we do our, cost projections, et cetera, we kind of use a specific benchmark, but it'll fluctuate depending on how much that family actually makes, if that makes sense. The two benchmarks are area median income and then percentage of rent that is considered a sustainable amount for rent per family.
Got a mic over here?
Yes, hi.
We'll have a math class later.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot of numbers.
There's a lot of charts in affordable housing. I've seen the charts.
Okay, we ready? Okay. So glad you're all here. First and foremost, just a comment, and then Scott, look at your text message I sent you, please, Scott Standish. And so I'm just giving him a heads up. So, okay, thank you. So first of all, those of you that don't know Michaela, she's wonderful, I think, and it's so sad that she left the redevelopment authority. We miss her a lot, and we're glad to hear that you're still in the business and doing this work, which we can benefit from, because now you're placed somewhere else to also do awesome work. So thank you for that, and for you and Chad to talk about this, particularly bringing up projects from a county standpoint. And I know this group, and certainly the Hourglass, has framed this issue so much as a really important, I think one of the most high needs of addressing this issue from a county standpoint. This issue related to housing and how connected it is to people that are unsheltered and the issue of homelessness. So hopefully in the near future we'll be seeing a formal plan related to homelessness and housing, the two of them connected because of both of them being a significant public health issue and well-being issue. So I think we'll see that in the future. What kind of goes to Dana, though, I'd like to give Dana a shout out for your comment related to enough studying. So thank you so much for that, because I think between the work that the Hourglass has done and many other partners, we have a lot of information out there to build off of to come up with a strategy, particularly related to homelessness. My shout out and my text to Scott, if he can jump in terms of the county's work related to the issue of zoning. So that's what we're hearing. So first and foremost, I just want to make the statement around homelessness being and the need for housing for people of all income levels, and particularly like workforce housing and housing related to people that are unsheltered is workforce housing, because many of the people that are unsheltered around the county are working and they don't have a place to live. So that's really significant. But I want to pointing out Scott, just because he is head of the Planning Commission for the county, and they have been providing a lot of technical assistance to the communities for many years. You've heard about Healthy People's 2040, and so Scott will
Let's do a duet. Let's hear it.
Okay, Scott will give you an update on something I think that's really exciting.
Very quickly, I know
All right,
we're running out of time.
Scott, bring us home.
Okay, well, this is great.
as you know, we've been working with a number of our planning partners on this topic for a number of years. It has been a high priority, obviously, in Places 2040. And one of the things we want to get to now is stop the study. Let's get on with implementation. And part of that, obviously, one of the barriers you mentioned, Chad, is the zoning issues and so forth and subdivision land development regulations. So we've been working with our partners. We're in the process right now of developing a model ordinance for the county that would be sent out to the municipalities, working with them to try to deal with this pattern of development that we have within our urban growth areas primarily. And that would be really focusing on providing a greater variety of housing types in the county. Right now, it is a majority. It's a super majority of zoning in Lancaster County on unbuilt land right now is for single family only. And it's really not to talk about single family only as the issue, because you can have a single family home like I do, 26,000 square foot in the city, on a very tiny little lot, and it's not attached. So, so it's not really single family. It's single family on large lots that consume a lot of our land, and the costs rise from that point. So anyways, we're in the process of working with a number of different people in the community to really kind of put some guidelines out there to address those issues, also look at ADUs, accessory dwelling units, look at, many of the other things, parking minimums and all that kind of thing, to really address this issue from a standpoint of implementation.
Thank you so much, Scott. So yeah, this is a really nuanced conversation about affordable housing. We've talked about everything from the funding model, some of the challenges to the timeline, zoning issues, and appreciate all of our speakers today. If we can give them a round of applause, this is a great conversation that we need to keep on our radar. I will say, as always, we will have a video recording of this talk up on our website and YouTube channel next week. Our next First Friday Forum will be Friday, November 1st. That will be with the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. If you did not see my email today, it will also be my last day here at Hourglass, so I wanted to mention that. If you didn't read to the second paragraph of my email, which that was a lot to ask, I think, from some of the text messages, I will be moving on to a new role as the Director of High Impact at the High Foundation. A couple of my new colleagues are here, which makes that very special to announce. And in that role, I will be driving strategy for the High Impact portfolio, which is focused on affordable housing and environmental initiatives. So I will still be in the neighborhood, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you, and just appreciate your support at Hourglass, everything that you've done to support me here. And we are hiring a new executive director. I'm getting the wave from my board to make sure that I mention that. So please spread the word with anyone who would be great. And just appreciate all of you, and I hope you have such a great weekend. Thanks.